It's the tunnel cram! Believe it, we put a supercharger on a tunnel ram. That and intercooler testing gasoline E85, all of that on this episode of Engine Masters. This episode's about all my favorite things: big block Chevy, E85, blower shop, supercharger, and of course, tunnel ram. We've also got nitrous here. Unfortunately, we're not using that on this episode, but you can go back to episode 64 and see when we made 1,500 horsepower with this unit on nitrous. So we're gonna make a little bit less this time. Let me tell you about what the package is. It's a 555 big block Chevy. It only has 8.3-to-1 compression, big solid roller camshaft, AFR 357 cylinder heads. This is an 871 supercharger from the blower shop, and it has every trick in the book. Up top, we've got some QFT E85 carburetors because we're gonna be testing E85 and gas. I'll get to that. So the meat of it, though, is this tunnel ram. I've wanted to do this for so long. The problem with most 871 or 1471 blower superchargers that you can get for typical street engines is that the intake manifold runner length is about that long. Really, really short. Look inside this unit here, which is the race version from the blower shop, and you can clearly see that that port is so short that it's gonna favor really high RPM, probably way out of the range of anything anybody is doing with a root supercharger. And so I'm gonna test longer runner length. We did this once on an LS motor. You can go back and look up that episode and found out that runner length does in fact matter under boost. The question I've got about this is, will it help mid-range torque, or is it gonna make more power everywhere? And by the way, that intake manifold is available on eBay from a guy called Alky Digger. All it is an off-the-shelf profiler unit with a plate to bolt a supercharger. We're also gonna be testing intercoolers. Now with a Roots type supercharger, the intercooler sandwiches between the blower and the intake manifold. And then the air passes through this core right here, and there's water circulating through the core to cool it off. We're gonna find a couple of things when we install this intercooler. First of all, we're gonna run it with no water in it to find out if the core is actually a restriction to airflow or boost. Then we're gonna circulate the water and find out if that intercooler actually makes more power, and we're gonna do that on both gasoline with these Holley Dominators and on E85 fuel with those QFT carburetors that are designed just for that ethanol mix. This is gonna be really meaty. I can't wait. Stick to the end for the tunnel ram, or as I've dubbed it, the tunnel cram. And first, we're gonna run this thing with a regular manifold right here and no intercooler, and then just progress throughout the episode. Wait for it. You guys realize this is just an excuse to play with my blower motor, right?
Most of our tests are.
Well, I know, it's because I want to have fun. I want to be like invested. This is cool, instead of looking at like, you know, cylinder to cylinder distribution and trying to get down to the minutia of 30 graphs on the page. I want power.
Yeah, and wild and crazy stuff too.
And this is going to be absurd.
The important thing is while you're playing, you at least work some sort of test data into the program so we can all learn something.
Right, we are going to learn something, right? So we're going to baseline this thing on gasoline at 8.3% overdriven on the blower. It's going to make neighborhood of 1,000 horsepower, and we're going to be able to look at the power and the temperature before we move on to the intercooler. 1,000 horsepower, every test on this episode. Here we come.
I'm going to run it.
Let's go. I like that motor.
Makes me smile.
Wow, 1,040.2 horsepower at 7,200 RPM and 8.6 pounds of boost. 844.2 pound-feet of torque at 5,200 RPM. I guess the data we're really interested in here, though, is manifold air temp.
Well, that's certainly part of it.
So it dropped from 182 at the roll-in, and the incoming airflow and fuel flow cools it off, and it drops to a low of 168, then starts to climb up again to 170.
And that's pretty typical because actually at part throttle warm-up, when there's blower speed, but not really much fuel to cool it, you'll actually at part throttle see higher temperatures than at wide open sometimes. When I was warming it up, I could go part throttle and see 200, 220 degrees, but once the throttle's open, lots of fuel in there and it starts to cool it.
So the data is simple as that. 1,000 horsepower, 170 degrees, 226 BMEP. We're gonna go put the intercooler on there and find out if we have a reduction in boost and an increase in power because of a reduction of manifold temperature.
Let's go.
You remember in a previous episode, we made 1,500 horsepower with this thing with some nitrous on there. We still have the nitrous lines on there just because this spacer is in there and it sort of makes the linkage work and everything. We're not actually gonna use it in this episode. The blower's heavy. That is a downside. Okay, with the intercooler added, but with no water running through it, we actually did see a drop in horsepower. We made 1,024.7 horsepower on that thing, and the torque was 834.8 at 4,900 RPM, so that's down a little bit. Here's the power overlay. The black lines here show the intercooler with no water through it, and the red lines are no intercooler whatsoever. And so you can see the power loss is consistent. I think maybe that's consistent with an airflow reduction, isn't it?
Yeah, I would think so because
I mean, you're replacing a wide open hole with intercooler core, so it's got to represent some kind of
part
blockage.
of it shows in the shape of the curve too, where the demand isn't as great
Right.
at the bottom.
Right.
It doesn't need all the additional airflow. As we come up in power, it does.
So yeah, at peak, 15.5 horsepower difference. Will we make that up when we flow water through the thing? That's the big question.
I'm hoping we make that up. Even if you had water running through it, you could up the boost slightly, as long as the intake air temperature is lower.
But we're gonna run water through and not change the pulley
No,
ratio
just
at
so
all.
we can compare
So,
no intercooler or water to no water temperature.
So that's our next step. We just had a look at the efficiency of the intercooler core itself only as it pertains to airflow and power. Next step is gonna be test number 3, running water through the intercooler and finding out what that does to boost manifold temperature and, of course, horsepower. Horsepower numbers with water in the intercooler, 1,048.9 at 7,200 RPM, and the torque fell at 869.7 at 4,700 RPM, which I notice is actually a lower RPM than we were seeing before, and I think I know why. Let's look at the plot a curve of the manifold temperature on the wet version of the intercooler and the dry version of the intercooler, just to show what happened there. So what we're looking at here is the data on really not a lot of horsepower gain, but a massive difference in octane tolerance for the engine, especially if it was a really hot day. I mean, right now it's pretty cold. Our ambient in the room's not that bad. It's 172 degrees of inlet temperature without the intercooler, which is gonna go above 200 on the lake at a 108-degree day.
This is probably the biggest change in that style intercooler that I've seen. I expected to see 50 degrees or so, but to see, 60 plus.
Right.
That's a big change. It's in the low hundreds. I mean,
What's
that's
the,
like ambient air.
What's the water temperature going into that thing?
It's 72 degrees is all.
Okay, so the water temperature is 72 degrees going
Into
in.
the intercooler.
So I think it also shows you why in a passenger car this doesn't work if you plumb it through your cooling system, because if you're like us and you're running at 220 all the time, then you're actually heating,
heating
the air in
Good
there.
job.
You gotta have a remote water source to do that.
The other consideration here too is you could probably run more boost and make even more horsepower.
Oh, what did it do to the boost?
Well, that
we
was
gotta
where we
look
had
at
to
that.
go.
Next question. Whoa! Okay, the boost dropped from 8.9 pounds in our prior poll to 7.1 at peak. Now, here's the thing. Everybody is going to be saying, oh, well, you lost boost. That's why you didn't make power. But the thing is, it's making more power at less boost.
Yes.
Then there always gets into that big philosophical dilemma of now, do you go, okay, well, let's put the boost back to 8.9 and will it still run on 91 octane?
Well, and that's the thing is you're going to get the guys who say, well, no, the way to test it is to make the boost, bring the boost back up. Well, had we changed pulleys to higher boost levels without an intercooler, it would have made more power too.
Also.
So that's why I always get back into that octane thing, because it allows you to run more boost with less octane.
So let's conclude what we learned on the water through the intercooler. It cooled it a bunch, 60 plus degrees. It didn't add as much horsepower as we thought it would, but it was still a gain. And it reduced the boost because the air was cooler and contracted, so it was taking up less area in the manifold, so the boost number was lower, even though the power was higher. And all of that adds up to basically being able to drive the thing on lower octane gas. It's the difference maybe between wanting to fill up with 110 or just putting 91 in the tank.
That's my big takeaway on the intercoolers. I mean, almost any blower motor that's in a boat should have one. Because of the way they run, too. They're under a lot of load for a long period of time at high throttle positions. They build a lot of blower heat. So this thing, I mean, like I say, it's the detonation thing. I mean, the price of an intercooler versus the price of an engine, that's a bargain. And it did make more power with less boost.
To have this in a car requires a pretty big water tank between the water tank and the intercooler and all the plumbing and all the weight. I'm going to say not worth it for a drag race car, but if you were building a street car and you wanted to drive the thing around a bunch on hot days and not detonate, maybe it's something to consider.
You know, unfortunately, I think when you wick these things up in a street car, you're just looking at higher octane gas, because there really aren't, that I know of, any great effective intercoolers for street cars.
Yes, there is.
Oh, wait, yeah, there is.
E85. That's what we're going to do next, is change this setup by pulling the carburetors off, slapping some QFT E85 carburetors on, find out if that makes a difference. Wow, 1,125 horsepower just from a fuel change like that. 927.3 pound-feet of torque, all the way down at 4,600 RPM.
Wow.
Yeah, I knew there was a handful when I saw 900 when I rolled in.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too.
Wow. Can you just overlay that with the gasoline power, dry intercooler? I gotta see it. Whoa.
Wow.
I think that's similar to what we saw before on this very same engine.
It seems too good to be true.
It does. That is massive.
Yeah, I looked at the data from the last test when I was configuring this, and it's pretty amazing.
It's pretty close. So look at that. Gasoline in red, E85 in black. It's gotta be because the E85 has got cooler discharge temperature, right?
That and E85 has oxygen in it.
Now we're gonna look at the manifold air temperature of that gasoline versus the E85, because I think a bunch of that power's gotta come from the temperature. Wow. Okay, the red line here is gasoline. It's pretty much 178 down to 175-ish degrees. And then look at this. The temperature starts a little bit higher at the E85, but boom, does it plummet down to, what's that number? 80 degrees of intake manifold temperature. So the reason for this is that the E85 has a much greater latent heat of vaporization than gasoline, meaning it extracts much more temperature out of the air as it vaporizes. Wow. Let's look at the boost. We have to know. Interesting. So this is boost. The red line here is gasoline, black is the E85. The E85 did drop it, but not as much as I thought. The scale here is this is 8 pounds and this is 7 pounds. So the E85 did make 1 pound less boost, but make a ton more power. And it's because the colder, denser air takes up less room. And so yeah.
I'll take that any day.
All right, I guess our final question now for this part of the show is going to be, does the intercooler water help E85 or hurt the E85?
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to go flip a switch or throw a valve and put water in the intercooler and find out, does the E85 even care? All right, let's have a look at the data for water running through the intercooler on E85. Peak power, 1125 at 7200 RPM. Peak torque is 932.6 at 4700 RPM. I have to look at the overlay to know if that has any difference whatsoever.
So,
look at that. That is wet intercooler versus dry intercooler, and it is the same thing except for way down here where the wet intercooler has a slight advantage because...
The only advantage I see is the motor can now be 40 pounds lighter.
Okay, yeah, because you can run E85 and remove the intercooler. Yeah. Exactly. Let's look at the temperature, though. I mean, I'm sure it's just going to be flat tracking like that. Okay, interesting. The red lines are the dry intercooler, obviously hotter, and the black lines are with the intercooler. It made a difference of roughly 30 degrees, a little bit plus that. Down low, but up top, less. Still, I would have expected to see some of this in the curve, and we didn't. I thought it was going to follow exactly the power curve, and it doesn't. I mean, this explains why it has more power down low, right?
Yeah.
But then I would expect to see a difference in power here, too, and not so much over there.
Yeah.
So ultimately, when we get up at the top at 7,200 RPM, the difference in temperature between the dry intercooler and the wet intercooler was 2 degrees. 78 to 80. Nothing whatsoever. Well, I think this all comes down to the temperatures. Like, does 72 degree water cool 80 degree airflow?
Questionable, right?
Yeah. How about the boost number, which is right there? So this is manifold boost, red lines being the dry intercooler and black lines being the wet. And you can see that once again, it cooled a little bit, which then reduced the boost pressure, even though it makes more power down here. And up there, it's the same because the scale there is roughly 1/4 pound of boost.
2/10.
2/10 of a pound of boost, not carrying that much. Interesting. So the power number was what I expected. I thought it would be about the same.
Yeah, I didn't think it was going to
But the
change
temperature data is not connecting in my mind about why the power was identical.
And again, with all of these temperatures, there's a few variables. I mean, it's kind of like an EGT. It's where's the probe placed?
Yeah.
What temperature did you start the run at? How much engine speed was there? You know, how long the run was? There's a couple of things that vary it. And we're talking fairly small numbers here. We're talking 5 to 10 degrees.
So final conclusions on the intercooler part of the show. First of all, with gasoline, I would say the intercooler is completely worth it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah? Second of all, E85 is always better than gasoline with boost.
You can throw away that intercooler, too, because what's it doing for you?
That's the third thing, is that if you're on E85, the difference that the intercooler makes is negligible.
Agreed.
So now let's get to the meat of why I'm really here.
Why you're David Freiburger.
That's right.
Yeah.
The tunnel ram with the supercharger. It's the greatest scenario ever conceived.
These are a few of my favorite things. I'm David Freiburger.
That's right.
Tunnel ram, supercharger, big block Chevy, E85.
1,000 horsepower plus. Tunnel ram coming up next. Okay, up. There we go. Here comes the tunnel ram.
Are you waiting for it, Freiburger?
I am waiting for it.
Boom, boom.
Okay, tilt it more this way. Okay.
You guys
Drop it straight in.
Ooh, 1,155 horsepower at 7,200 RPM, and the torque is going to be absolutely punishing. 978 pound-feet at 4,700 RPM. Show me the curve. I gotta see the curve. If you're talking just peak-to-peak power gain between the regular manifold and the tunnel cram, we're looking at almost 51 pound-feet of torque and 30 horsepower.
Huge.
It's worth it. That is a brute.
Needs to go in a tank.
Yeah. Thing makes almost 1,000 pound-feet.
Well, and what's amazing about this is how much power it makes at such a low boost level. I mean, I'm just blown away by how much power at 7 pounds.
I have to credit that blower shop blower.
Yeah.
They've got something going on there that is super relevant, and I'm really dying to find out what happens if I put a big old Hank and crank pulley on it and really turn this thing up. What happens when it does make 12 pounds?
Or 14.
Or 14.
Or 15 or 18.
Wow. And what happens when we spray nitrous on it now?
We can make 2,000 if we try real hard.
Billy?
With a 500 shot of nitrous?
Did I just hear 2,000?
Steve Brule just said we can make 2,000 if we try hard.
I don't know, we put a 42 jet in it, in the nitrous, and we wick the thing up to about...
That's a 400 shot.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we wick the thing up to about, 12, 13 pounds of boost, and who knows?
Who knows? Oh man, so there you have it. 2,000 horsepower coming up if we ever have the stones to do it on Engine Masters.
They drew my shape, they wrote my name, kept me locked inside their frame. But now I see with clearer eyes, their walls were built on shallow lies. I'm not the girl they tried to mold. I'm fire now, not just the cold. They fear the voice I kept inside, but now I let it burn and rise. I bend the